Why is he saying that Georgia was a fraudulent state, that he actually won when he did not?
Yeah, that's what he believes. I mean, he says the things that he believes, and obviously now there's a federal investigation going
Is
on
he
into
right
it.
or is he wrong?
I don't know. There's an investigation that a federal
You don't
judge signed
know?
off on, so we'll find out.
Scott, you don't know?
I
I,
thought in the
what,
Scott, you
past.
used to know
Yeah, you used to know.
what
You
are
used
you
to
asking
Yeah.
him? Is he right or is he wrong about
about fraud in Georgia, that
In
whether he
2020.
won or he lost Georgia.
all the evidence we have right now is that Georgia was not fraudulent. However, my point was
Well,
that a
we have
federal judge,
evidence.
a federal judge just signed off on a warrant to go get evidence, and now there's an investigation going on. That was my point.
Well, to Scott's point, really quickly, we do have evidence in Georgia, and I know people don't want me to cite my own reporting, so I will cite the Atlanta Journal-Constitution because it is left wing. We know that during the 2020 recount, 3,000 ballots were scanned twice. The Secretary of State's office could not confirm if those were counted, though election integrity activists say they were counted. We know during the audit of the 2020 presidential election, there were, quote, several cases in which election workers mistyped vote totals or allocated votes to the wrong candidate. The state election board gave a
Brianna.
slap on the wrist.
How many
We know that
times-
we know that governors
Hold on.
said it was fair.
Brianna, let me just we'll move on from this for a second, but I just want to.
What's up, family? So I want to break this down all the way. I'm talking straight to the camera, no notes, no script, just vibes and facts. Because what we're watching right here is the moment when CNN's usual playbook starts falling apart in real time. So you got Abby Phillip, right, who is a CNN host. And when I say CNN, I'm talking about a network that leans heavily left, meaning they usually defend Democrats, push Democrat friendly narratives, and treat conservatives like they're on trial every time they open their mouth. Abby Phillips' whole thing on these panels is what I like to call fake fact checking. And let me explain that for the normal people in normal terms for the people in the back. Fake fact checking isn't about correcting lies. It's about interrupting, reframing, and selectively correcting conservatives mid argument to make it look like they're wrong, even when the facts are debatable or still under investigation. It's like arguing with someone and a referee suddenly jumps in, blows the whistle, and only penalizes one side. And that's how she controls the debate, Abby Phillip. And normally this works because let me be honest, a lot of these liberals on these panels come unprepared, vibes only, talking points only, no homework done. So when they start losing, Abby steps in like the substitute teacher who suddenly remembers she has authority. But here's where it gets spicy because she's already met her match with Scott Jennings, who's basically the male version of I came with receipts. But now there's a female version entering the arena, and her name is Brianna Lyman. Sorry, Brianna Lyman. She's a reporter for the Daily Caller. She writes for the Federalist, and that matters because those are conservative leaning outlets that actually prioritize digging through documents, filings, transcripts, and source material instead of just reacting emotionally. While Abby is running off of memory and narrative, that's the difference between showing up to court with evidence versus showing up with a speech you practice in the mirror. And every single time Abby tries to jump in with one of her little, well, actually moments, as we know she liked to say, Brianna just calmly drops receipts, dates, documents, Pacifics, and you can see Abby getting visibly frustrated because her usual tactic isn't working. And this isn't about vibes anymore. This is about facts versus framing. And the topic they're arguing about is the 2020 election in Georgia, which, before anyone starts screaming, let me translate that in common sense terms. When people say the election is being investigated, that doesn't automatically mean fraud was proven. It means there are unresolved questions, audits, testimonies, or legal reviews happening, which is normal in a country where elections are supposed to be transparent. But Democrats hate that conversation because even the possibility that something wasn't perfectly clean threatens the narrative that everything was flawless and unquestionable, right? Funny business doesn't mean cartoon villain stuff. It means irregulatories, um, procedural questions, irregularities, procedural questions, ballot handling concerns, and chain of custody issues. The boring but important stuff. Most people don't even know exists unless someone explains it. And that's why this exchange matters, because Brianna isn't making emotional claims. She's pointing to documented concerns that are part of the public record, while Abby is trying to shut it down before viewers even hear it. And when that shutdown fails, when receipts hit the table live on air, the frustration shows because the illusion of control cracks. So, what you're about to watch is not just a debate, it's a live demonstration of what happens when narrative meets preparation, when talking points run into paperwork, and when a host used to steering the conversation suddenly realizes the steering wheel isn't responding anymore. Check out this next clip.
Votes. What are we to make of all of this?
Well, I think given that under Joe Biden we had millions of illegal aliens come in, it's definitely fair to be worried that there could be non-citizens voting. We know that non-citizen voting does happen, even if it is rare, according to some on the left.
How frequent is it?
Well, if you want a list of it, I actually have some for you. Hold on one second.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, like actual numbers.
Yeah,
You
no,
get to
absolutely.
page 6 or 7
Or
to
people.
find them.
I know.
I actually wanted to have a lot of quotes for you guys. All right, here we go. So a Georgia audit found 20 non-citizens registered to vote. 9 of them ended up voting in a previous election.
20?
Yeah,
Nine.
let me finish. In Michigan,
After how many years?
you know, it's funny when you guys mock small amounts, but let's remember that Marionette Miller Meeks won her 2020 election by 6 votes. Imagine if there were 6
Were they
fraudulent
6
votes.
undocumented immigrants?
No,
my
they
point.
weren't.
My point is that some elections are decided quite literally on the margins,
Sure.
and every vote counts.
But not a single presidential
wait,
election
let's
has
just
been decided by a margin
Can I
of
just finish my
non-citizen
point? Can I
voters.
finish my point? That doesn't, just because it doesn't impact a presidential
the-
election, does not mean that it is not worthy of attention.
What is the percentage of fraudulent non-citizen voting in America?
I don't have the percentage, but I have more examples if you
percentage would
guys
you
wouldn't cut
accept?
me off. Let me just finish.
I don't know
Exactly.
I don't know if
Hold
it
on a
exists.
second. Hold on a second. 41 non-citizens cast a
maybe
ballot in North
higher
Carolina in
than 1 out of 1
2016.
million.
Okay,
1,500
41.
foreigners registered to vote in California by the state DMV. They were not citizens in 2018.
Oh, did they
they vote?
were
they
they
vote?
caught?
Did they vote?
Actually,
Did they vote?
it doesn't
They're
matter
just
if
registered to vote. That doesn't
Registering
mean
vote
they
as a
vote.
non-citizen is legal.
So-
According
I know,
to
but
18
they
U.S.
didn't
Code,
vote.
Section 1015, subsection F says that anyone
Look,
who knowingly makes a false statement when
hold on,
registering to vote
but here's the
can
thing.
get jail time.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I wanted you to go through it because I think it illustrates in and of itself how actually incredibly rare this is. And even when, the Heritage Foundation went looking for non-citizens voting over the course of, 10 years, 10 plus years, they found 77 cases, actually more than 10 years, about 24 years. They found 77 instances of non-voters voting, and they went looking, okay? So listen, if this were about people, non-citizens voting, maybe that's the case, then please help me explain why Trump is still obsessed with Georgia, where he was looking for 11,000 votes, where Georgia, they've got voter ID, they've got tough voting laws. Why is he saying that Georgia was a fraudulent state that he actually won with?
And this is where the logic pretzels start twisting themselves into knots. Abby Phillip literally asked for the facts, she asked for the data, she asked for receipts. And when Brianna Lyman actually gave her exactly that, suddenly the argument shifted from that didn't happen to, okay, it happened, but it's not a big of a deal. And that right there is the scam. That's moving the goalpost in real time. Because if you really look at it, that's someone accusing you of lying about a charge on a credit card. Let's use that example, right? Someone's accusing you of lying about a charge on your credit card. You pull out the bank statement proving the charge exists. And they go, well, okay, but it wasn't that much money. No, stop it right there, because that amount is the point. The principle is one illegal vote is an illegal vote, period. Voting isn't like a suggestion box. It's not a vibe-based activity. It's a control system where eligibility matters. And even if one person is not allowed to vote, casts a ballot, that ballot cancels out the vote of someone who is legally allowed to vote. That's what vote dilution means in normal human language. Imagine you and I both order food, but someone who didn't pay jumps in the line and takes half your plate. You still ate something, sure, but you didn't get what you were entitled to, and that's dilution, right? And well, dilution. And the wildest part is the same people who scream nonstop about protecting democracy and voting rights suddenly stop caring about voting rights for the moment the conversation turns to enforcing eligibility. Hmm. And they only care about access, not integrity. Integrity. They care about expanding the door, but not checking who's walking through it. And you're supposed to just accept that logic without asking questions. And Abby's response of, well, it's not a lot, is basically saying, yeah, your votes were violated, but only a little bit, so relax, which is insane because when you apply it to literally any other right, if one person illegally searches your house, would that be okay because it wasn't a lot? Would that be okay? If one person stole someone's car, would that be fine because crime overall is down? No. Rights don't work like that. Either they're protected or they're not. And that's why CNN doesn't like the facts, not because the facts are wrong, but because the facts force them to abandon their original talking point. First, it's, oh, that's not true. Then, okay, it's true, but who cares? And that's the pattern every single time. That's the goalpost moving. And Brianna Lyman did exactly what you're supposed to do in a debate. She stayed on the original claim, brought documentation, and didn't let the conversation slide into emotional minimization. Meanwhile, Abby Phillip is gearing up for yet another one of her trademark fact checks, which at this point aren't about accuracy, they're about control. But the problem is when the person across from you is actually prepared, when they came with research instead of vibes, the fake fact check routine collapses. And you can feel the frustration building because she's realizing this isn't going to be one of those segments where the narrative gets saved by a quick interruption. This is another moment when receipts are about to get dropped. Another narrative is about to crack on live TV. And once again, Abby Phillip is running headfirst into someone who isn't playing the game the way CNN expects them to. So we're gonna go move on to this next clip I want you guys to check out.
They fight more than this panel.
The Cato Institute had a study out this week that said
Not the Cato Institute. I just quoted them a little
well,
while.
we got another one from them from 1994 to
I mean, they are
2023.
conservative.
The U.S. immigrant population generated more in taxes than they received in benefits from all levels of government. Over that period, immigrants created a cumulative fiscal surplus of $14 trillion in U.S. dollars, including $3.9 trillion in savings on the interest on debt. Without immigrants, the U.S. government's public debt at all levels would be at least 205% of gross domestic product, nearly twice its 2023 levels. The facts are pretty clear. It's not just that. It's clear on education. It's clear on housing. It's laid out there, and yet the Trump administration, rather than addressing what voters want them to address, which is the economy, cost of living, they keep blaming immigrants for everything. Why?
What kills me about Abby Phillips and all these radical left, far left lunatics and Democrats and things like that with these talking points and over here protecting illegals to the fullest extent, it blows my mind because when you really think about it, family, these individuals are basically puppets for the Democrat Party, basically spewing talking points to defend the Democratic Party. But what happens when you get minimized to the point where they push you out because they're so in control? They're so in control where they obviously Abby Phillip. It doesn't. It's like they don't care as long as they're paid. It's like, how don't you have a soul? How don't you stand for something? How can you spew this most anti-American rhetoric? And the simple fact is, they'll replace you in a heartbeat, Abby Phillip. But the only reason why you're convenient right now, because you're convenient to the simple fact of spewing the most anti-rhetoric on top of protecting the illegals, which the Democrat Party wants. So as long as you continue to be the puppet to the puppet master, and it's convenient for them, but as soon as the illegal is so far prioritized to the point where they're in control and dominating your talking, dominating your how can I put this? Dominating how beneficial you are to you're no longer beneficial, Abby Phillip, then how would you feel that you realize you voted for your own demise and you vouch for your own demise because then the legal is going to be so far in favor over you that it doesn't matter what you say anymore because you don't stand for nothing and you're basically a soul that's bought. sitting on a mainstream liberal media outlet such as CNN to the point where an illegal immigrant take your spot, Abby Phillip. How would you feel about that? And that's the ignorance I can't stand and understand, because once the Democrat Party get what they want, they're gonna move on to the next individual or next puppet who is convenient for them. But it's like, because they haven't been affected yet, they don't realize it. But what if the individuals, the puppets that were part of the puppet master, in this case, the Democratic Party, who puts party over people? The question, and let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. And if you're loving this video, give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe if you're new to the family. If you're already part of the family, I appreciate you for rocking with me, and I appreciate you for just watching this video. But the whole point is, it blows my mind, because what if the puppet master gets mad because they don't get their way, and they just cast out Abby Phillips and all the puppets who didn't do a good enough job to get them in control as they wanted to, because it's just angry? Because we know that the Democratic Party loves agents of chaos. But what if you're not the agent of chaos to the standard they want you to be, to the extreme is so high that even Abby Phillip has to eventually get pushed off the ship? It blows my mind. Let me know what you guys think, but let's continue.
Yeah, before we get to that, I just want to correct the record really quickly. You did say that Governor Kemp and Brad Raffensperger both said the election was fine. I also just want to point out, people, that Governor Kemp did come out with a risk-limiting audit report, which did clarify there were 36 inconsistencies. And Brad Raffensperger also clarified 36 different boxes of inconsistencies.
Are we in the same show?
Hold on. I just want to make sure.
But
wasn't allowed
you're
to
saying,
respond.
you're clarifying. Did they say that that the election was fair and there was no fraud in it, or not? Did they?
They're
say that?
saying that there were problems in the election.
Well, hold on.
Yes.
No.
Yes, they're saying
Governor
that.
Kemp so Governor Kemp said there were. That is not true. Governor Kemp has
According
said
to
there
his
were
risk.
All right. Now, this is where it actually gets ridiculous, because you're watching this thing happen in real time. When the moment Breonna Lyman, I'm botching her name, sorry. Breonna Lyman starts actually reading facts, not opinion, not vibes, not sources say, but documented information. The entire energy in the room shifts, and suddenly it's like, whoa, slow down, stop reading that, stop saying that out loud. In this case, Abby Phillip, as you guys hear her, wait, that's not true. And that alone tells you everything you need to know, because let's be clear, Abby Phillip's position here is basically that the 2020 election in Georgia was perfectly clean. Zero issues, nothing questionable, 100% legit. End of discussion. And anyone who suggests otherwise is treated like they're crazy. But here's the problem. We know for a fact that's not true. And when I say we know, I don't mean Twitter, rumors, or Facebook posts. I mean court cases, hearings, audits, sworn testimony, procedural irregularity. Sorry, family. Irregularities. Irregularity. Irregular. Irregularities. Irregulatories.
Irregularity.
Procedural irregularities. Things that were literally documented and discussed on public record. And that doesn't mean the entire election was rigged. And see, how am I being precise here? It means there were problems worth talking about, which is supposedly what journalists are paid to do. And that's why this moment is so telling, because Breonna is actually an actual reporter doing reporter things, citing sources, laying out evidence, explaining what happened, where questions still exist. And instead of engaging with the substance, instead of disputing the facts with counterfacts, the response becomes interruption and shutdown. And it's like someone challenged you to show proof, and then the second you pull out the proof, they go, okay, enough. We don't need to read all that. No, you asked for it. You don't get to hit the brakes just because the evidence is inconvenient to you. And the way Abby reacts, visibly annoyed, cutting her off, trying to redirect, makes it painfully obvious that the issue isn't accuracy, it's control of the narrative. Because facts are only welcome when they support the storyline, and when they don't, suddenly facts are rude, facts are disruptive, facts needs to be rushed past, And that's why the sarcasm hits so hard here. Please stop reading the facts. Sounds like a joke. But that's literally what's happening, as you guys can see. The mask slips, the quiet part gets said out loud, because if your argument can't survive someone calmly listing documented issues, then the argument was never solid to begin with, right? And that's why this exchange matters more than just two people arguing on a panel. It exposes how certain media spaces don't actually want open discussion. They want controlled discussion where the conclusion is decided before the conversation even starts. And when someone walks in with receipts and refuses to play along, the frustration shows immediately. And that's not journalism versus misinformation. That's narrative versus reality. And watching someone try to shut down facts on live TV is about as loud of a tale as you can get. Let's continue.
Limiting auditing, there were 36
What did Governor
inconsistencies in a
Kemp-
November 17th, 2021 letter
Hold
to
on
the
a second.
SEB. These are election inconsistencies found by Joseph Rossi. They
hold
were
on a second.
then tested, and the
Governor
veracity of
Kemp-
his work was independently repeated, and they found out that all of the 36 claims were true. Now, for
Hold on.
Breaking
Brianna,
up when
you are
this is
trying
over.
to imply that Governor Kemp said that there was
he
fraud
found.
in
No,
the
I
20,
didn't say
20,
fraud,
in
inconsistencies.
2020 election.
I said
He did not
inconsistencies.
say that.
validated the
He said that it
election.
was a free and
17th
fair election.
in
And
a-
on
over
top
and
of that,
over.
he also pointed out that there were elections that occurred after Donald Trump lost. And those elections were also free and fair. And not to mention that other Republicans who were on the very same ballot as Donald Trump did better than he did. So whatever I'm not saying there is nothing that is inconsistent about elections.
But it was a
That's
free
why
and
there
fair
are
election.
checks. That's why you go through them and you find them. The fact that they found those inconsistencies is actually proof that the system is working. Okay.
Right. They found out after
so
the
when
election
you
was
argue
conducted, which
that
is a
when you
problem.
argue that the existence of errors is proof of fraud, that makes no sense, because we
Well, I
should go
didn't say
back
fraud, I used
then
the word
and
inconsistencies.
re-audit the Republicans who outperformed Trump on that very same ballot.
I think
How do you
audits are
explain
good.
that?
Why
I think.
are you
Wait, can I finish
rationalizing
my
anyway,
answer before
all of this
I want
stuff?
to answer your question about the economy. I
Yeah,
want to
please
answer
do,
that.
because we don't want to derail this
We're not
segment by
derailing
going
it.
back
You
to
did.
something
Put
that
words in
was
my mouth.
litigated 6 years ago.
Okay, well then I just
6
highly
years ago.
recommend that people listen
Okay.
to Ann Brombaugh, the attorney for Fulton County, who says that yes, she confirms
thought
that
we were
closing
going
tapes are
on
not
this.
Go
signed
back
still
to the
reading
topic
stuff?
that we
Yeah,
are
well, if I
talking
was allowed
about
to
right
answer the
now.
first time
Thank
last
you.
segment, I would have answered that question already. Well, you can look up the November 17th, 2021 letter. I can send it to you.
Okay, great.
As for Scott Bessent, with immigration, first and foremost, I thought this Cato Institute report was a little sloppy because they did not differentiate between illegal aliens and legal immigrants, which I think is bad for the.
Well, just to be clear, this
How is it every time I talk, I get cut
because
off?
you're saying something that's not true.
Yes.
The report says that
The report takes into consideration both
Yes, that's what I just
legal
said.
and illegal, and they say
Yes.
in both cases, immigrants contribute more than they take away from the system. So it does address that very thing that you're saying it doesn't address.
Right. But I'm saying that I think people would also like to see, regardless, just the separate numbers. That being said, I think what a lot of conservatives and MAGA people believe is America is not merely an economic opportunity zone. Even if all immigrants, if we brought in 8 billion people to America tomorrow and they boosted our GDP, we're still not taking into account what happens to culture, society, overpopulation, things like that. And if illegal aliens or legal immigrants, however Cato wants to put these together, is like a cash cow, then you would see plenty of other countries around the world saying, come here, come here, come here, but they're not. So to pretend like illegal aliens, first and foremost, so why isn't any other country taking all of our illegal aliens?
I mean,
They
Canada
don't
is actually
even their
taking more
native countries
immigrants.
don't want them back.
All right.
Can I just make one simple point about
I'm
this?
sorry,
stuff?
and
we had
hold on,
aliens.
hold on.
I didn't
We're
know
gonna-
They're the worst of the worst.
That's
let
a
me just
legal
say
term.
we're going to
You're
take
a
a
lawyer.
quick
You
break,
should know
and we'll
that.
come back on the other side, and I'll let you make.
Oh, you're gonna take a quick break. This is comedy right here, because you're watching Abby Phillip do this move where she asks a question, looks you dead in the face like she wants an explanation, and then the exact second Brianna Lyman starts answering it. Hold on, stop. Oh, that's not correct. And that tells you everything you need to know, because in real life, when someone actually wants an answer, they let you finish the sentence. When someone doesn't want an answer, they interrupt you the moment you start saying something that threatens their position. All right. Abby isn't confused. She's defensive. She's so combative, and it's disgusting. It's nothing more worse than a combative woman, right? Amazing woman who uses her femininity to her power. A sweet, wonderful woman. She will listen. That is the first essential key of their power, right? And femininity, and their sweetness and softness gets them so further. and actually makes the conversation productive. So Abby Phillip is not looking for clarity. She's looking for a trap. She wants to ask a question that sounds unanswerable on TV. So the audience thinks, oh, well, see, they can't even respond. But the problem is the question is totally answerable. It's answerable. She just doesn't want the answer. Said it out loud. Because the answer comes with facts, context, distinctions that blow up the narrative. So instead of letting Brianna respond, the strategy becomes cut her off, talk over her, rush past it, act like time is running out, and anything to avoid letting the rebuttal land. And that's why they're afraid of the facts line isn't even rhetoric. It's observable behavior. If you weren't afraid of the facts, you'll let her talk. Period. And that's why this whole exchange is hilarious, because Abby has clearly met her match, right? The fight's over. She's knocked out, KO, right? in boxing terms, right? But the studies part, right? I want to get to the studies part. Now, this is the studies part. And when people say, well, studies show, the first thing you're supposed to ask is studies about what exactly? Because not all studies are created equal, and a lot of so-called liberal studies play word games. One of the biggest tricks is refuse to distinguish between immigrants and illegal immigrants. That's not accidental. That's deliberate. You know, immigrants, broadly speaking, including legal immigrants, naturalized citizens, visa holders, green card holders, people who followed the process. Illegal immigrants are people who did not follow the process, right? So these are two completely different categories with completely different legal statuses, economic impacts, and access to public resources. So when you mash them together, you muddy the waters. So nobody can hold the system accountable. And here's the logic, right? If you refuse to even acknowledge that illegal immigrants receive public benefits, which Democrats and liberals constantly deny, then how am I supposed to trust a study you produced about cost, impacts, or outcomes? You're starting from a premise that we already know is false. We know factually that illegal immigration receive public benefit in indirect ways through state programs, emergency services, schooling, healthcare, housing assistance routed through nonprofits, you name it. And it's not always a check with their name on it, but sources are absolutely being spent, exhausting the resources to legal immigrants who are taxpayers, and American taxpayers who put into the system, and it's not fair to American citizens, let alone legal immigrants, to their children and the resources that they work so hard to obtain, because now that the resources are being exhausted, for example, the school system where there's bodies that's not supposed to be there because they are illegal and they came into this country the wrong way, then it's not fair to those who pay taxes and trust in a system like the education system to put their kids in to learn. Not to mention that it's sort of coming off indoctrinated, and a lot of people say based on me seeing recent incidents of high schoolers. I seen a video of a mother who actually was trying to pick up her 16-year-old, but the high school were protesting against ICE, and she couldn't do nothing about it or call police because the school allowed it. So that's where we're going at, where it's becoming political instead of teaching our kids, let alone the bodies that are making a classroom full, that's exhausting the resources that the American taxpayer pay in that state, hoping and believing and trusting the education system to have resources to the top of the top to make sure their child is being properly educated by paying their taxes and put into a system that is broken, with illegals being there that's not even supposed to, with a classroom full of heads that's exhausting resources where they say they don't have enough books, they don't have adequate books or better resources because the education system can't keep up with having adequate resources and investing the money's right, because they're so busy playing into that social realm, or that, how can I put it, that welfare social program realm, instead of educating our kids and making sure they have the top of the top to make sure their IQ is up and aligned and they're reading and they're being efficient. That's why the reading levels, and there has been lower IQs, and it has seen a study after 2019. It seems to be that more kids, within our school system in the United States are becoming dumber, right? But if you have a lot of heads in the school that shouldn't be counted for, and they don't pay into the system, and there's not enough monies for the amount of heads that's in that classroom that shouldn't be there, then it's not fair. And then you wonder why the school system is failing, right? But getting back to the whole thing with the studies part that with Cato that Abby Phillips kept mentioning, that's why when you look at the study of the premise of it already being false because they're acknowledging resources that are being spent with illegal immigrants in it from an indirect way, and you mash them together as immigration, but not looking at the different statuses and how the illegal immigrant is benefiting from the legal immigrant who pays taxes. You are basically your study refuses to even accept that that's a possibility, right? And then your conclusions are already compromised. That's like doing a study on shoplifting but refusing to count anything that wasn't caught on camera. And that's why cherry picking a study about immigrants with writ large is intelligently dishonest when the conversation is specifically about illegal immigration. Nobody is talking about immigration. Nobody's talking about immigrants overall. And that's a deflection. That's switching the subject mid-argument so you can cite friendlier data. And Brianna clocked that immediately, which is why Abby didn't want her to explain it, because once you explain it in plain English, the trick stops working. The audience realizes, oh, wait, you're talking about apples and she's responding with oranges. And once that clicks, the entire argument collapses. And that's why the interruptions happen. And that's why the frustration shows. And that's why, once again, Abby Phillip finds herself up against someone who's not intimidated by the setting, not confused by the framing, and not willing to let a bad study or a bad question slide without calling it exactly what it is. So when you look at all of that, right, it's really amazing because it perfectly shows how the rule is magically changed the second a conservative walks into the room with actual facts, actual paperwork, and actual preparation. Notice the pattern. When you come in with vibes, they let you talk all day. When you come in with receipts, suddenly, let's wrap it up. Let's have a break. Hold on, stop, because they don't want you to finish the point. And Brianna's point was dead on accurate. No matter how uncomfortable it made the room, Abby Phillips cited this study, as you see on the screen, cited a study like that was supposed to be the final word. Like, boom, science settled, conversation over. But when you actually read the study, and this is where common sense kicks in, the study does not give a standalone detailed analysis of the economic impact of illegal immigrants specifically. It doesn't. What it does instead is lump all immigrants. It lumps all the immigrants into one, right? It lumps all of them into one. And then try to infer meaning. Meaning, guess who might be undocumented based on proxies like wages, labor, participation, taxes paid, and eligibility rules. That's not hard data on legal status. That's estimation. That's educated guessing at best, right? And when you're talking about public policy that affects millions of people, guesses matter. You don't get to say, trust the study, and when the study itself admits it's inferring rather than measuring. That's like saying you ran the numbers on who's stealing from a store, but you didn't check IDs. You just guessed based on who looks suspicious. And then on top of that, the entire premise of these liberal studies rely on the claim that illegal immigrants don't receive public benefits, which we know is not true in the real world. Look at Minneapolis and Minnesota with Governor Tim Walz, with the Somali immigrants who stole with the fake daycares, right? Look at Mayor Jacob Frey over there in Minnesota. So they may not get a federal check with their name on it, but they absolutely receive Medicaid, emergency health care, food assistance routed through states, nonprofit, schooling, housing support, all the stuff taxpayers fund, right? Just through indirect channels. So if a study starts from the assumption that none of that exists, why would anyone trust its conclusions? You're building a house on a cracked foundation. And that's why people don't buy these studies, not because science is bad, but because incentives matter. Most of these researchers lean left, their institutions lean left, and their conclusions just so happen to line up perfectly with the liberal narrative every single time. And miss me with that, but it's libertarian defense too, because a lot of libertarians are openly pro open borders and pro mass immigration, legal and illegal, and that's not a secret. They also have incentives to downplay costs and ignore externalities. Dang, I can't get my words together. And here's the part liberals will never want to engage with. Even if illegal immigration were marginally positive and pure, GDP terms, a lot of Americans do not see their country as just an economic spreadsheet. People care about culture, cohesion, infrastructure, strain, housing costs, schools, hospital wages, and social trust. Those are externalities, and mass illegal immigration creates real negative ones, whether studies like it or not. That's my whole point, right? And when you look at the whole thing in Minnesota, Feeding Our Future nonprofit, right? That was supposed to feed children through COVID. In the name of nonprofit, there was fraud taking place, and there was never no children. And the Somali community benefited off of it. And that's what I mean by their name might not have a check on it, but in the name of a nonprofit, they're committing fraud. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Hope you guys got some value from this conversation and this video. Love you guys. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. And as always, we just having a conversation. Peace.